I started small, because that's what anger taught me. Patience. Revenge isn't fireworks, it's a slow-burning fuse. I watched Jacob first, the easiest to bait, because he fed on attention and arrogance. He paraded through town like he owned it, clinking his beer against old men he used to call friends, flipping a laugh when anyone tried to tell him to slow down. He thought the world owed him its respect because of a last name I had given him, not the work he'd never known. I learned the rhythm of his nights, the bar on Main where he swaggered in at 10, the way he slouched at a corner table with two men who did his dirty deals, the truck he left idling outside like some macho ornament. I learned the faces he trusted. Those faces were the first cracks. Reputation is a currency all its own in places like ours. A whispered lie at the right bar can be worth more than a lawyer. So I set to work in the only currency I had left, the knowledge of a town's soft spots, the memory of favors and debts nobody wanted to remember. I left notes in plain hands on doorframes of men who still remembered my name. Short things. Jacob cheats on the books. Jacob doesn't pay his men. Jacob sells the farm he's sitting on. At first, they thought it was kids being cruel. Then a man I used to loan a tractor to told me he'd been stiffed on welds. Another man at the mill said Jacob had taken his payment for a load and never delivered. People like simple things. The truth wrapped in a rumor that sounds plausible. I fed it. I let it spread like a stain. I saw the change in the way men met his eyes, from friendly to wary. He noticed. He started walking a little more aggressively, trying to force the respect back into place with a louder voice and a fist ready. I didn't confront him publicly right away. Why waste the moment? I wanted him unraveling on his own first, to feel the ground shift under his boots. So I sat in the shadows of the bar one night, while he talked loud and wrong at a man who'd once been his mentor. The mentor left mid-sentence. The bar quieted, and Jacob's face went red. He took his anger outside and walked into the cool night air where I waited, because of course I waited. "Hello, son," I said, and even in the low light I could see the color drain from him. "You were supposed to be—" His voice broke, the rehearsed bravado collapsing into something animal and fearful. "Dead?" I said, and let the words sit between us like a verdict. "Not yet." He lunged, drunk and stupid. He swung at me with a fist meant to intimidate. I let him get it out. There was a small joy in feeling the old reflexes come back. Dodge, step, take the weight of a man's lunge and put it somewhere it could hurt him. He threw wild haymakers, breath smelling of beer and the cheap cologne he thought made him manly. I felt the shift when I grabbed his wrist, felt the bone whine, felt his balance go. The crowbar he'd left leaning against his truck became a prop in a scene he didn't know he was in. I slotted it into his hands as if handing him a script he'd written for himself, and answered his violence with a practiced motion he'd never expected. I hit him hard enough to fold him up on the gravel, hard enough to break ribs, to prise the arrogance from his face and leave something raw and exposed. When I stood over him, breathing, watching the light in his eyes flicker with confusion and pain, I didn't feel satisfaction the way the movies sell it. I felt clarity. I saw the exact thing I had wanted the night they left me in the dirt. His certainty taken away, the scaffolding of his confidence removed. He gagged and spit blood and tried to understand how the man he'd wanted gone could still have breath left in his chest. You wanted me dead," I said, "and this is what it's like to have the world turn on you." He didn't beg for mercy like I thought he might. He couldn't. He coughed and tried to laugh, then the laugh was a thin, wet thing. Men who survive violence in that town walk away different. Some get quieter, some get meaner. Jacob got small. He tucked himself into a motel room for days, sold a piece of land he'd barely owned, started missing meetings. Men who counted on him found themselves looking over their shoulders. It was working. Anna was harder. Anna had always been hard. While Jacob carried his arrogance like a flag, Anna folded herself into a knife. She had the calmness of someone who'd learned early how to use people like paper. She dressed neat, her hair pulled back, the kind of woman who could make a judge smile and a banker write checks. She never raised her voice, but she made people do what she wanted with a look that promised something both pleasant and poisonous.
You can't punch paper and expect it to bleed. Contracts, loopholes, shell companies, that's Anna's battlefield. To strike at her, I had to become invisible in a different way. I needed documents she couldn't ignore, people she'd trusted to turn against her at the precise moment when her confidence would be most fragile. So I spent cold nights learning accounts, sneaking into filing cabinets with gloved hands, copying ledgers. I traded favors with an old friend, a clerk at the county records office who still did dirty work for a bottle or a memory of better times. I hired a woman who thought she was a buyer, and she played her part like a fox. She came to Anna with contracts, with promises of investors and development, with checks that looked real. Anna took the bait because the style fit her hunger. She loved making deals, loved the idea of being the smart one who turned earth into money. I threaded the contracts with clauses that ate at the very pillars of what she'd built, deferred payments that could be retroactively called due, penalties for misrepresented titles, small legal traps that would snap when pressure applied. Then I fed a journalist friend a sliver of truth about Anna's offshore accounts, the hidden partnerships, the way she'd laundered cash through a fake charity. Journalists are predators, too. They can smell a scandal like a hound. He wrote a piece that wasn't quite an exposé yet, just enough to make investors nervous. Anna smelled the change sooner than Jacob. Men who smiled across banquet tables at her stopped returning calls. She tried to smile through the pressure, but smiles get teeth when the jaw is tired. At a meeting meant to secure a large buyout, men in suits stared down at her with folding expressions she hadn't arranged for. They asked questions about transfers, about titles, about related parties. Her answers tightened like a noose. I was there, in the shadows at the back of the room. I watched her face recalibrate, the confidence drain out of her, replaced by something like fear. When she caught sight of me across the room, it was like cutting through a sheet of ice. She mouthed my name like a curse. "You can't sell a soul twice," I said later, when I let my shadow cross hers in the parking lot, and her hand shook so badly she dropped her keys. "Yours was gone the day you buried me." She tried to strike back with lawyers and threats. She called men who'd once protected her name, but the web I'd woven had threads in more places than she'd ever expected. Bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. Offers were withdrawn. Contracts that seemed secure unraveled because of one small clause a tired clerk had flagged when the forms were reviewed.
Anna left that meeting a ghost. She still wore the clothes and kept the haircut, the armor of someone who'd never been defeated, but the edges were dulled. She called me once, late, voice hoarse. "You think you've won?" I heard fury and desperation, wrapped in a woman who thought if she screamed loud enough, she could make the world bend. I didn't answer. Why give her the mercy of words she could use? Matthew was the poison that surprised me the most. I'd always thought him softer, maybe because he would bring me coffee in the mornings, or sit with me after a long day while Jacob and Anna plotted how they might change the world. He was the one I assumed would break away, not towards violence, but towards something like a life. That faith nearly killed me. He'd followed them that night because he wanted to belong, because he wanted to be someone bigger than the farm. He'd tried to tell himself it was for the family, for the future. But when the ground closed over me and the world went muffled, when their laughter bled into the trees, he'd stood there with his hands in his pockets and watched. Maybe he was frozen. Maybe he was guilty. Whatever the reason, he was complicit. Hunting him down was like watching a wound try to stitch itself. He drank away the guilt. He wrote me letters which he never mailed, folded into pockets like contrition he didn't know how to show me in person. He started sleeping in the barn, angry with himself, angry with them. I found him there one night, knees on the dust, face in his hands, the moon making him look younger than his years. I'd expected pleading. I'd expected the fragile words of a scared man. Instead, he looked at me with the same blank face I'd seen that night in the doorway. "Dad," he said, and for the first time in months, a tremor of something like hope hit me. Maybe he'd finally crack, and maybe I'd find the man who used to fetch water and listen to his father's croaking stories. "He made me. I didn't want to—" "I let them bury me," I said. He dropped into a shell of silence. Tears came. He begged. Clothes muddled with the mud of the farm. He tried to make himself small, wanted me to give him absolution he didn't deserve. I didn't want to just punish him. That would be too easy for any number of reasons. Punishment without purpose breeds worse things. I wanted him to feel the slow grind of consequences. So I did something meaner than a fight. I called for a meeting in the barn. I asked him to come alone. He showed up trembling, voice thick. I met him with the same steady look that used to make him giggle as a kid when I played the bad guy. There was no crowbar this time. There was no quick satisfaction. I tied him, not cruelly, but enough to make him still. A rope looped, a post to lean against, a bottle just inches out of reach. It's a strange thing to hear a grown man ask for water and not hand it to him. He cursed and begged and whispered his regrets like prayers. The hours stretched. The dark outside the barn thinned into a pale dawn. He slept in fits and woke in guilt. I watched him sit through a day of his own mind without escape. People can endure pain. They cannot always endure their own thinking about what they have done. When morning came, and his eyes were rimmed red with sleeplessness, he looked like a boy scraped on the inside. I cut him loose then, not because I'd had a change of heart, but because the watching had done its work. He staggered away slowly, sober in a way that frightened him. I saw the man he might become, haunted in his step. What they call justice is polite. What I did was more personal. It was messier. It asked them to look at themselves in a mirror that didn't flatter. Blood follows blood. That's not just a phrase, it's math. The more damage you do, the more scars you collect. I was scarred. They bore new scars, and they would wear them like jewelry or a brand. The town started to whisper different things. Some pitied me for the betrayal. Some thought my revenge was too much. A few said I'd gone too far. It's funny how morality is a thing people like to inspect only once the blood has dried. I didn't stop until I saw the exact thing I wanted, the unmaking of the arrogance they carried into my house. Jacob in the dirt, Anna on the run from patrons who once kissed her hand, Matthew waking up not drunk but hollow. Even then, I felt no triumph like the one scripted in movies. I felt older, heavier. There's a price to standing on someone else's ruin. The night I finally walked back into the house felt like stepping into someone else's story. The kitchen smelled of old coffee and dust. The children's rooms were empty of the sound they used to make. Photos still lined the mantel, but the faces looked different. Not because they had changed, but because the light on them had. My hands trembled when I reached for the old wood table where we used to eat. Memories are a curious currency. They can warm you and bankrupt you at once. I sat there and thought about what I had done and what had been done to me. I had taken away the thing that made me human, trust, but I had not gotten back what I had lost. The farm was intact in a way, the fences repaired, the accounts straightened by men who still respected the name I carried. Yet when the trucks rolled and the seasons bent, there was an emptiness that no amount of repaired barns could fill. People asked later whether I regretted it, whether I would do the same again if I knew the outcome. Regret is a small, absurd thing for men who have been buried alive by their children. If you're asking if I would let them kill me so they could take everything, the answer is no. If you're asking if I would choose the path of my vengeance, knowing the loneliness it would leave, I hesitate. The truth is ugly. Revenge touched a part of me that I'd kept tightly wrapped for decades and left it raw. There were nights I lay awake and pictured them as they were before. Small, chubby, sticky with jam and belief. Jacob with a scraped knee and eyes that still wanted to trust me. Anna with a braid down her back, meaning to run away to a city, but always coming home. Matthew with a crooked grin, offering up the one coin he'd saved. I'd hold on to those images like driftwood in a storm. Sometimes they buoyed me. Often they'd drown me. When the dust settled, the town returned to its business. The bar reopened. Men went back to lifting and hauling. Anna moved away, her name like a bruise she couldn't rub out. Jacob took to keeping to himself, a man in the corner with hands that no longer found easy use. Matthew came around sometimes, eyes hollow, but when he spoke, we stuck to the things that kept us from tearing everything again. A nod, a grinder of coffee, the sound of a pickup firing up in the yard. I don't tell you this to boast. I tell you because the truth is rarely given the honor of being simple. Revenge is a theater piece with no audience left afterward to clap. You get what you ask for, and then realize you've never had the script for your own life without those actors in it. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind moves through the rafters of the barn and the moon hangs thin and mean, I walk the property line where they buried me, and I stand in a place that remembers. The dirt there is softer. The grass grows differently. Maybe it's just my mind, an old man thinking the world keeps secrets. Or maybe there is truth to how places hold what's done on them. If there's a lesson here, I won't dress it up with righteousness. Teach your children to earn, not to inherit with shame. Don't confuse giving with making ready. Love is not the same as enabling. And if you find yourself the victim of your own blood, and God help you if that happens, remember this. Revenge doesn't fix what's hollow inside you. It only redraws the contours. I never forgave them in any simple way. Forgiveness is a soft thing for soft hearts. I accepted them in the form they returned to me, altered, chastened, carrying what they'd sown into their skin. The farm is quieter. The nights are colder. I sleep with one eye open. Old men learn to live with ghosts the way sailors learn to live with storms. People who hear this might say I did what I had to do. Some will call me monster. Some will call me protector. Both things can be true at once. We are complicated instruments, humans, capable of good and ruin, patience and cruelty. I did not go to the grave to die. I clawed out, and in the process I gave up a part of myself I can't reclaim. I live now in the echo of what happened, sometimes glad, sometimes ashamed, always aware that blood has a language, and it spoke in our house that night. The words it left behind hurt, and they will for the rest of my days.